let's go back. I really want to, you're from St. Catharines, Ontario.
Yes.
I'm from Hamilton, not too far away.
Rival towns, kind of.
Not too much, because there's not much of a rivalry when one city's so much better than the other. But anyway, that's another story.
No, you're right.
Did you come from a musical family?
I'm going to say no. You know, but I did come from a family where my mom let me play the records in the house. My dad left when I was very young, but he left his records. So when I was old enough to put them on the turntable, you know, my 45s and things, they were, you know, a box that my dad had left. You know, some of them had his name written on them, or my mom. A lot of it doo-wop and country music, and I was just fascinated by these records. You know, I wanted to know what the A side was, or the B side was, and I thought it was amazing how everyone had their own voice, such unique voice. I find a lot with today. You know, there's a lot of affectation, and sometimes you can't tell one singer from the next. But back then, you couldn't mistake, you know, like Buddy Holly from Johnny Cash, or Dusty Springfield from Karen Carpenter. I mean, they just had these very unique things. So I just became obsessed with, and also all the music on the radio.
So you think that planted a seed with you?
It really did. And nothing else connected with me, you know. I mean, I liked soccer, I guess, but music, like my brothers were always outside running around, and I was always like sitting by the stereo, or even if you played road hockey or something, there'd be a transistor radio right on the curb, you know, playing the hits of the day. So it really did, you felt like, you know, it was a bit of a soundtrack, you know, to some movie you were in.
How old were you when you picked up the guitar for the first time?
I was about 14, and I got forced into it. I had started a band with some friends, just because it seemed cool, not because we had any talent, and I just wanted to be the singer, you know. I wanted to be like Roger Daltrey with the mic, and nobody wanted to play guitar, and I got sort of shamed into getting this electric, it was like a silver tone guitar from Sears, and but
14's kind of late, isn't it, to pick up the guitar?
I know, and the thing is, my first love was always piano, but. You know, I play piano now, like badly, but I can write on it. But, you know, it was sort of the bane of my existence was, my mom played piano when she was a kid, and the piano that was at my grandparents' house was supposed to come to her. And it ended up going to her sister, and they used it to put plates on. You know, like it had a doily hanging on it. And if that piano came to us, I would be just like Liberace by now, you know. So I didn't start playing until I was like in late 30s or 40 or something. So
you didn't come up with conservatory and all that business.
No, and I was self-taught, and you know, now I'm at a point where I can play and not look at my hands, but I didn't learn the right way. So, but the guitar was kind of like second prize for me. But I did get into it, and so I would say by the time I was around 17, you know, I was really into the Who and all that, and that's the kind of I wanted to be like Townsend and yeah, so I do love the guitar, but initially I was kind of like, oh, why do I have to do this, you know? So.
We should say, you live in Stratford, Ontario today.
Yes.
You have not done what so many others do in this country, which is try to find fame and fortune south of the border. You've stayed here.
Yeah.
How come?
Well, there was a lot of pressure, you know, to move to LA initially because I was signed there, and at one point I even had an apartment there. That the label paid for back when labels had money, you know, it's insane. And also there was pressure at one point to move to England because the UK has always been my biggest market. And I'm just, I don't know, it always meant a lot to me that Gordon Lightfoot didn't do that. You know, I mean, not that I have any problem with Joni or Neil going down to LA or Leonard. I get why they went, you know, because that's where it was happening at the time, and also that's where the nice weather was,
and lots of money.
Lots of money to be made, yeah. And I guess I'm not, also because I had kids, I had small kids, and I couldn't just sort of, you know, what's the word? I didn't want any upheaval, and they were going to school, and so there was pressure from different sources saying, you know, telling me, yeah, I'd probably have a better shot at, you know, making it, you know, in another place.
You know, Eugene Levy made the same decision you did.
He stayed.
He stayed. He's lived in downtown Toronto his whole time.
Even when he was making
movies out there, he always stayed here.
Yeah.
Yep.
I wanted
his kids to be educated here, wanted grow up knowing what it means to be Canadian.
And does Dan live here, or does he?
That I don't know.
Okay.
Yeah.
I did see. I was in Christmas shopping once at uptown where all the fancy stores were, and I saw Eugene Levy shopping at Christmas, and I was like, whoa, that was a pretty starstruck moment. Those guys are incredible.
But you, how do I put this? There's lots of sort of very famous musicians who have both recorded your stuff and admired your stuff. I'll name some of them here: Rod Stewart, Coldplay, Emmylou Harris, Katie Lang, Michael Bublé, Leslie Feist. Is she just Feist, or is she Leslie Feist?
I call her Leslie, but I think, yeah.
Because she sometimes just goes by one name, right?
I think she's known as Feist.
Yeah, okay. You've got this weird thing where you're, in some ways, well, you just referenced it, you're sort of more popular in other countries than you are here in Canada. Do you have a theory about why that is?
I think initially, if you look back on the 90s and what was happening musically, it wasn't what I was doing, I mean, you could, Pearl Jam, and it was there was a lot of, the music had a lot of kind of like anger.
It was harder.
Yeah, and I don't know why, there seemed to be a lot of, like this, and I didn't do that. So I would travel around, especially in America. I toured so much in the 90s down there, listening to the radio, and I didn't hear anything that sounded like what I was doing. They could not get me on the radio. And not, I mean, up here even, I didn't get a whole lot of radio. And I just think because I was a bit older, I didn't get signed till I was 30 or 31. And all my initial influences were British invasion, the Kinks and the Beatles, obviously. And so my sound was like the sort of folky stuff from the Canadian folk stuff and the British invasion. And so when I finally, when my album was finally released over there in '96, because the label was about to drop me in '95 because my record did not perform. They didn't like me, and it wasn't until Elvis Costello held my album up. It was December of '95 on a magazine, and that was really the shot heard around the world, because then that's when I found my audience. And I remember going to England the first time, and I got this hero's welcome. The band Squeeze opened up for me, and it was a band that I was a huge fan of. I met Paul McCartney the first week I was there, second week I had breakfast with. I mean, it was insane after a year of touring, opening for everybody and nobody really caring. It felt I felt vindicated.
And yet, you celebrated your 60th birthday not too long ago with a sold-out show at Massey Hall. That's kind of cool, I would think.
I'm still kind of reeling from that, because...
And they sang happy birthday to you.
That was powerful. And it wasn't even, my birthday on that evening, but I mean, Massey Hall, that was like the 5th time I've played there, and I've always got a good crowd, but I've never like sold it out until this show.
The Agenda with Steve Paikin is made possible through generous philanthropic contributions from viewers like you. Thank you for supporting TVO's journalism.